takes place in the context of what is called Israeli Apartheid Week, which is happening worldwide. And I have heard several people say, oh, why do you have to call it like that? This was not invented by the organizers, Palestina Solidariteit, nor by the Human Rights Center. It's an international label for events that take place in many different countries. Yet, I'm a human rights lawyer, and I would like to say something about that. Yes, apartheid is a specific term for the injustice that happened in South Africa at a specific time of its history. And of course, what's happening in Palestine is not exactly the same thing. But if you've been there, if you have visited it, if you've been to the West Bank, you will see it. Personally, I thought using apartheid or the apartheid wall was a radical speak that was not productive at all, until I'd been there, until I had seen how things are organized on the ground. How you have a nice road from one settlement to another. That's only for one part of the population. And people can be distinguished on the basis of the number plates of their car. And others, Palestinians, have to drive to their villages to other much not so good roads that were, well, at least at the time when I was there, full of roadblocks, so you had to make enormous detours as well. If you have seen how water is distributed or rather not distributed, how one part of the population has swimming pools, whatever, and the nice settlements, whereas the villages are really dry, suffer from shortage of water. Yes, personally, I see it. It's a very adequate metaphor, if you ask me, and even legally, it is absolutely not to be dismissed so easily as a label. So that's my point of view on this. I said I was not going to be talking much. Today's topic is a different one. I think the thing that troubles me so much with the Israeli-Palestine situation is that it has been lasting for so long that people almost get used to it, and that they lose the power to raise their indignation, to address the issue afresh, because it's been lasting so long. It is structural injustice, and you feel powerless. You feel like there's nothing you can do about it. Well, the topic of today introduces a new way of doing something about it. Individuals in their capacity of consumers, individuals in their capacity of users of goods and services can also be political beings. Individuals do not directly work with the government of Israel, but we do use goods and services of a number of companies that are complicit in some of the human rights violations and in the injustice of the illegal occupation itself. And that is what this is about, the complicity of companies and how public authorities working with such companies become also complicit. Here, in our own municipality, maybe in our own university. As you know, there has a campaign has been going on for a while, since 2013, by Palestina Solidariteit about a particular company that is complicit in human rights violations linked to the occupation, which is G4S, a security company. The Human Rights Center at Gent University, which is an academic center, has also been engaged in this campaign. We have one excellent researcher, Lieselot Verdonk, who unfortunately is currently doing field research in South Africa, so that's why she's not here today, who has written free legal advice, excellent legal advice for Gent University, as well as for the city of Gent, explaining them how they can get rid of such contracts, how they can legally do it. Nevertheless, we are sorry to say that we failed to persuade either the City of Ghent or Ghent University in this respect, but both have their own representatives here today who will explain why. Who will explain why they were not able to take such a decision to refuse to work with such a company. Philippe Watteau, an alderman from the city of Ghent, will be able to attend the event only for a short time. So we have sort of organized the order of events taking into account his limited availability. He will be speaking around 8 o'clock. That's why our guest from Israel, Najwan Berekdar, will be speaking after him. So Najwan is from an Israeli organization called Who Profits from the Occupation, an organization that documents corporate complicity with the occupation. So, as a first speaker, we will have Ann Peters from the organization Palestina Solidariteit, so one of the organizers of today's event, who will give an introduction specifically about the activities of G4S. After that, so we expect Philippe Watteau, then Ms. Najwan Berekdar, and then we will have a panel discussion where Najwan is so kind to join us again, together with our Deputy Chancellor, Professor Freddy Mortier. We're very glad to have you here, as well as Professor Eric David from ULB University, who has done some legal work on this issue. So, may I kindly invite Anne to give us her presentation about G4S.
Thank you all for coming, and a warm welcome to you all. I hope it will be an interesting evening, but I think it will be for sure. So I will give a very quick introduction before Philippe Watteau will be here on G4S and how this company is securing injustice, so that you have some background information for later on during the debate. G4S is one of the many private security companies in Israel and the occupied West Bank. We see that there is a growing presence of private security companies, and that they are taking over tasks traditionally executed by the army. They are providing a wide range of services to civilian and military occupation structures. Later on, I will tell what these occupation structures are. So these companies, they operate in open breach of international humanitarian law and human rights. And they are used by the Israeli authorities as a means of outsourcing Israeli human rights violation and escaping government accountability. And I should not forget to do this. So G4S is one of these companies. G4S Israel is a subsidiary, a branch of the Danish-British multinational G4S. In 2010, they applied to the UN Global Compact program, and they stated that they are protecting human rights and that they are not complicit in human rights abuses. Now, we will see that this company is complicit in human rights abuses in 4 ways. So the first way is that they are providing security systems to detention centers for Palestinian political prisoners. The second way is that they are providing services to Israeli military checkpoints in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. They are also providing security services to businesses in the illegal settlements inside the West Bank. And they are providing security systems for Israeli police headquarters also inside the West Bank. So the first way that they are providing, that they are complicit, is the security systems to the detention centers for Palestinian political prisoners. G4S is having a contract since 2007 with the Israel prison authorities. And they are providing a large branch of security systems, like monitoring systems, visitation control systems, control rooms, metal detector gates, and so on. And they are providing this in 6 different detention centers. One of them is Ofer, located in the occupied West Bank, and 5 others are located in Jerusalem and Israel. Here you can see a map of these prisons. So in these prisons, many human rights abuses are taking place. First of all, there are many cases known about torture and abuse inside these prisons, which sometimes they lead to the death of the prisoners. Also, every year there are 700 Palestinian children who are detained inside Israel, inside the Israeli prisons, in total breach of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. For example, they are interrogated without the presence of a lawyer or one of the parents. Also, the prisoners who are inhabitants of the occupied West Bank, they are relocated to prisons inside Israel. And this is in total breach of the 4th Geneva Convention. And of course, this relocation of the prisoners also has consequences for the families, because when someone who is a citizen of the West Bank wants to visit his or her family member in a prison inside Israel, they have to ask for permission to go there. It's a very complicated procedure, and many times they even don't get the permission to go inside Israel to visit their family member in the prison. Then these prisoners are the Palestinian prisoners, at least. They are also deprived of many of the basic rights that the Israeli Jewish prisoners are getting. For example, access to phone, education materials, education itself, and so on. And these prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners and the Israeli prisoners, they are prosecuted under 2 different law systems. So the Israelis, they are they fall under the civil law, but the Palestinians, they fall under the military and security law. And of course, this means that they lack a lot of liberties and legal guarantees that the Israeli prisoners get. This is a picture of the Ofer prison inside the occupied West Bank, where many Palestinians are held, and G4S installed there the main control room. Then the second way of complicity of G4S in human rights abuses is providing equipment and maintenance services to Israeli military checkpoints in the West Bank. These checkpoints, they are part of a complicated system of movement restricting mechanisms imposed on the Palestinians of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So next to the checkpoints there are also roadblocks, and here it's written separation wall, but I also prefer to call it apartheid wall. So these structures are meant to inspect the Palestinian population through extensive body and luggage searches. And it's G4S that supplies the scanning equipment for the full body scanners at several checkpoints in the West Bank and also at the added checkpoints in Gaza. And this is a picture of such a luggage scanner. This is a picture of the checkpoints in Bethlehem at the moment that Palestinian workers are waiting to go inside Jerusalem. The third way of complicity is providing security services to businesses in settlements. Now, these settlements, they are illegal under international law, and it's forbidden to relocate people of the occupying power to the occupied territories, but that's what Israel is doing. So that doesn't matter for G4S because they are providing security equipment and personnel to shops and supermarkets inside the settlements. So there are some names of the settlements. These are inside the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And finally, the fourth way of complicity is providing systems for the Israeli police headquarters in the West Bank. These headquarters, they were established in 1994 to investigate the crimes committed by Israeli citizens, mainly illegal settlers, inside the West Bank. Now, these headquarters, they support the normalization of the presence of this illegal settler population, and they support also the institutionalization of the two different legal systems. And next to that, these headquarters are located in the E1 zone. This E1 zone, which you can see here, is cutting off the north and the south of the occupied West Bank, which impedes the Palestinian economy. And at the same time, it's also annexing the settlement of Ma'ale with East Jerusalem, so that Israel actually can establish a greater Jerusalem, so that it's one and undivided capital for Israel. That's the purpose of this zone. Now, having contracts with such a company is quite problematic, I think, and many people think so. So after a call in 2012 from the Palestinian prisoners, many campaigns all over the world were starting, and also in Belgium. Before I say something about the campaign in Belgium, I will speak about the G4S in Belgium. It's here the biggest security company. It has almost 6,000 employers in Belgium, and it has a turnover in 2012 from more than 347 million euros. As in other countries, they provide a wide range of security services for private persons and companies and for governmental institutions. It's also important to note that G4S Belgium is a branch of the Danish-British multinational G4S, so it's not a separate company, like G4S is also not a separate company. They are both subsidiaries from the multinational G4S. So the claim that G4S Belgium doesn't have anything to do with G4S Israel, and that they cannot be held accountable for the activities in Israel is, in my view, false. The campaign in Belgium started in 2013, and we decided to focus on Gent, on the city of Gent. The city of Gent proclaims to be progressive, so that's one of the reasons why we focused on Gent, and it also has 3 big companies with G4S. These 3 public contracts are worth more than 4 million euros. There is a contract for parking controls, and that's why many of us know G4S, I guess. There is also a contract for the money transportation from certain city departments and money collection from the parking meters. And the third contract is the monitoring of about 140 city buildings, including the monitoring of schools. I will be brief because I see that Mr. Mathieu is arriving. So how did our campaign start? We met with the local politicians to tell them about G4S and their problematic contracts with this company. As Eva already mentioned, we were supported by legal advice of the Human Rights Center of the UGent that explains in a very detailed way that a city can, under international law, not have contracts with companies complicit in human rights abuses. Next to these meetings on the legal opinion, we also had a platform of 18 civil society organizations in Gent, and that shows that there was and there is still a lot of support for our campaign among the inhabitants of Gent. There was also a petition that you can still sign, and there were many open letters from civil societies in Palestine, and from Palestinian former prisoners. Next to this, we had many public actions, as you can see in these pictures. So the legal opinion of the Human Rights Center caught some attention. A parliamentary question was asked last year by Jan Rogiers from SPA at the level of the Flemish government. And because of that, the Flemish government decided to conduct a research on G4S and about the possibility of breaking contracts with this company. The Human Rights Center says clearly that there is ground to break contracts, and it is a ground of act of great misconduct in the course of its business. So it's possible to break public contracts, to exclude G4S during the procedure of tendering, and to not prolong the contracts. The research that was done by the Flemish government was finished in September 2014. But it says that there is not enough ground to break the contracts with G4S, because they say that there are two legal, G4S Israel and G4S in Belgium are two different legal personalities, and the link between the facts in Israel and the contracts with the Flemish government institutes is missing. They also say that only states can be held accountable for human rights abuses and not companies. But in the beginning of the presentation, we saw that Israel is by purpose using private security companies to escape its own accountability. So now we can have discussions with legal arguments pro and contra. And it's true that cities fear trials and claims from the part of companies like G4S. But does it mean that we have to close our eyes and continue the way we are doing? I hope that it will be clear during this evening that there are enough moral arguments to change the current situation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Anne. Our next speaker is Alderman Philippe Watteeu from the city of Gent, Alderman from the Green Party. And all of your friends, I promised him that I would introduce him in a sufficiently critical manner. So I would like to confront Philippe as a representative of the city of Gent with an initiative taken in the city of Molenbeek, near Brussels, where upon the initiative of PTB, it was voted that no contracts could be granted to any company that is active in the occupied territories. This was an initiative taken there in Molenbeek when a similar contract was coming up about electronic surveillance, not with G4S but with a company called Radwin. So there they did it, they excluded these companies, so why can't the city of Gent do this, Philip? That's my question to you. Also, since we know that it was said by Anne, it is a progressive city, it is a city run by two political parties, Socialist Party and the Green Party, which in the federal parliament take up very strong positions on the occupation. So the question is, when you are in power then, at a certain level, the local level, can't you act upon these same principles and these same statements? Philip, I'll let you explain what the problems are and why the city cannot do it. You can stand there if you like. Yeah.
Okay, although my English is rather weak, I'll try it in English. And I apologize because I have to leave in about a quarter, so in 15 minutes. So I try to explain our position. First of all, you don't have to convince me about the action. I support I'm a very strong supporter of what my party says about this action. Sorry. I'm not responsible for. Is it? So, no? Okay. Yeah. So I support also what de Vriend. I support also what de Vriend does in the federal parliament. So no discussion about that. But you should know that the field of tenders, of public procurement, is a very turbulent field. We have to pay attention on every step we make. So every vagueness, every mistake, every controversy leads to appeals, to claims, to complaints. Every mistake, especially when it are tenders that are rather important. So if you make a tender, if we make a definition of the procurement, the lawyers of all the companies, also G4S, are figuring out the text for every mistake that there is in the text. And they do it very precisely. So as a reaction, as a result, the lawyers of the city, our own lawyers, are trying to make, are searching as many certainty as possible. Yeah. They are very, very prudent. So, we asked our legal department an advice about G4S. And our own legal department, and I'm not a lawyer myself, but our own legal department brought down every argument to exclude G4S. The professional failure, the bond between two daughter companies, G4S Israel, G4S Belgium, is no ground, no reason to exclude the company. So, but it is our own legal department. So at that moment, we were in a position, maybe we can take a risk. Okay, but in September, the end of September, we got a letter from the Flemish minister, Elisabeth Holmans. So, and she said very clearly, there are no grounds to exclude G4S. And that's for us very difficult. Why? Because, and that's something different from Molenbeek, because our supervisory government, the government that looks at what we are doing, is the Flemish government. And the Flemish government says no grounds, no arguments to exclude G4S. So that means that's more difficult than our own legal department. Why? Because I said the field of tenders is very turbulent. Every mistake is a complaint. Every mistake leads to appeals. So it means if we exclude G4S, then it will lead to an appeal. That's very clear, and that means that you know already now what the decision should be from our supervisory government. Supervisory government has already said, Flemish government has already said, no grounds. So if we try to do it, there comes a complaint. So it is clear what the decision will be. The decision should be, or will be, Gent, the city of Gent is fundamentally wrong. So at that manner we can't work. It's impossible for us to work. We can't try at that moment. Our policy is at that moment, other policies is at that moment very difficult. So, we are in a very difficult situation. We support the action, but we can't do anything with the tenders. So what should be done is at the federal level. It's there that they should change the royal decree. They should at the federal level change the royal decree where they give a definition of the professional failure. And so it's rather or the federal parliament that can do such thing, or the federal government. So we as a party are in the federal parliament, and Wouter de Vriend has already written a resolution that will come on the agenda of the federal parliament to have such a definition in, for example, the royal decree. The royal decree is something that has to be written by the minister, by the government, but if the parliament votes a resolution, he is obliged to do so. So that's our position, and it's not a comfort position, but we are also, and we have said so, we are also willing to, at the moment, there changes something in the position of the Flemish government, we will change our position to exclude, to do what the action demands. So far the explanation.
Thank you. Since he has to leave soon, maybe if there are one or two questions from the audience to Mr. Watte, we can take it now because we will have to be leaving afterwards. You can take one? Yeah, there.
So, good question. You are thinking about the possibility to exclude them from participating in the tender process, but can't you look at the elements that you are putting in the tender that you are going to evaluate the companies on to make the elements that you are going to quote them on, to formulate them in such a way that you will have possibility to choose another company, and then for these specific services, how many competitors were there, or is this just this one company that is offering?
For the last part of your question, that's one of the problems, that there are not many companies that are competing with G4S, and so we have a market. If we exclude G4S, it will be a very difficult market. And the other companies, that's also difficult. The other companies are smaller than G4S, have less power than G4S, so it's difficult. But can we write the tender on a manner that that G4S can't compete? That's very difficult. That's what I said, that the moment we write a tender and there's a publication, lawyers are figuring it out every letter. Letter for letter, word for word, sentence for sentence. And if there is something wrong, if there is something that they say that this is really written to exclude G4S, then there follows a complaint, and we know what the decision will be. So that's very difficult, and we have had such things. So that's very difficult. Yeah. But if you have suggestions, or if someone can say how we have to write it, so.
Well, I'm just thinking that if there's only one competitor, and only the biggest one is able to perform these services, then maybe the things that you're asking are to make it possible for smaller companies to join.
Yeah. That's one of the things we try to do. We are writing our tenders on such a manner that there is competition. Yeah? We have done it recently for a tender. We have really tried to write it to have competition. We had 4 competitors, but the company that had the best results was G4S. I'm sorry, but it was not very pleasant. But we try to do is, we have also for the moment a tender that normally has 2 parts, and we had it in the first version of the tender. It was one tender, and because of that it was one tender, it was only G4S that was a possible candidate. We have cut it in two. But the possibility is that we have two tenders now, two parts of the tender. The possibility is that G4S wins both. Maybe not, but maybe they do. But we try to have more competition. And that's the thing we can do now for the moment. Yeah.
Sorry, no, but we knew this in advance. At first, Mr. Hatteo had said he could not come at all, but in the end he agreed to come briefly between two other events. So, thank you very much. We will continue the discussion on these topics, though. Thanks, Philip. There's a risk that this There's a risk that the debate might get something between lawyers and get very technical, because there's a lot of high-tech lawyering involved in this. And as you notice, that is also how such companies scare a public authority, because they litigate. They're not afraid. They have the resources. They can litigate. Just one example of the creativity that there can be on the other side also, though, is the University of Bergen in Norway, which confronted with a tender from G4S, decided to add a reputation cost, because this company, they had the lowest bid, but they said, if we work with them, with what they are doing in the occupied territories, we are going to suffer an immense reputational damage. So they added a lot of money, saying, so there's a cost involved, and as a result of that, this was no longer the best bid. So that was an example of creativity. But we will talk about that later with Freddy Mortier, I think. For now, I would like to invite Ms. Najwan Beregdar from Who Profits from the Occupation to explain to her the excellent work that her organization is doing and the situation on the ground. Thank you. Yeah. The PowerPoint.
So good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Najwan Beregdar. I'm actually a Palestinian activist. I'm here to represent the Israeli organization, but it's important for me to say I'm Palestinian and I come from Palestine 48. As for Who Profits, which I recently joined, I actually joined them also as because I believe in their work as a Palestinian activist who has been active for a long time in the occupied territories and inside Israel, because we're also fighting for equal rights as citizens of Israel. It's not only the problem of the West Bank and Gaza, it's the problem of the whole Palestinian society wherever they are. But I think that the Who Profits work in the political, on the economic activism is one of the most effective ways to actually pressure Israel from the outside to change its policies and violations of human rights against the Palestinians. I can see that some of the people who are here were attending yesterday's event, so I hope I don't bore you again with the same information. I'll try to change some of the things. As for Who Profits, Who Profits is a research center dedicated to exposing the commercial involvement of Israeli and international companies in the occupied Palestinian territories. We actually investigate the work of the international corporations and Israeli ones, not only in the Palestinian territories, but also in the Syrian lands. But that's another topic, in the occupied Palestinian Syrian land. Since Who Profits was created and founded at 2006. We've been mapping all of the activities that are performed by these corporations in the settlements inside the occupied Palestinian territories. Our main focus is actually 3 categories. Oh, sorry. This is a bit difficult. Okay, so we focus our work on 3 main areas. The first category that we focus on is settlement industry. When we talk about settlement industry, people refer to the production and the products of the settlements. These are not. This industry is not really a major industry. There are several settlement products other than the agricultural products, of course. And they benefit, of course, from low rent, special tax incentives, lax enforcement of environmental and labor laws, and other governmental supports. But even though they benefit from all that, because they work in the settlements, they still employ Palestinian workers for cheap labor, for severe conditions, and actually dangerous work that these workers are doing. These workers actually have to attain a permit in order to get into these settlements and work there. Many of the directors of these factories in the settlements actually raised the claim that we're actually providing work for the Palestinians because there is no work in Palestine for Palestinians, obviously because there is no economy and that's because of the occupation. So Palestinians have to work in the settlements and have to work in Israel sometimes, and that's not a choice. That's something that they are forced to do because they got no other choice to make money and have a living. According to one of the surveys that were done, it shows that 86% of these Palestinian workers prefer a different job, even if it was for a bit less money, but they prefer to find a different job. The same goes for many of the Palestinian workers inside Israel. 11% of these workers have to work in their own original land. So they actually go to the settlements, but they're working on a land that belongs to their family. That is in addition to the, of course, restrictions of movements on the way to the settlements, because even inside the settlements, inside the West Bank, we have a lot of checkpoints between the Palestinian cities and the Palestinian villages because of the existence of the settlements in between. So that's the daily life of a Palestinian worker. In addition to the settlements products, we have the construction of settlements. Israeli and international corporations build roads and housing units, provide services such as public transportation, water, waste management for the settlements. Of course, we have also the Israeli banks who are providing loans and mortgages for people who want to buy houses inside the settlements. And we have the telecommunications companies such as all of the Israeli companies such as Cellcom. We're talking about communication companies. They actually provide the same services for the Israeli settlers in the occupied Palestinian territories. So one of the claims that they have is that we provide a non-discrimination service. We cannot discriminate between both sides or both lines of the border, which is inside Israel and inside the occupied Palestinian territories. You would think that that means they would provide services to the Palestinians, but no, that means that they would provide services to the Israelis, just like they would provide services to the Israeli settlers, but they would still discriminate against Palestinians who cannot get the same services. And actually, even for the transportation that is operating inside the West Bank, Palestinians cannot take the same buses that the settlers take. And this is ethnic segregation between the two people, which actually emphasizes the point of apartheid and why it's called apartheid and not occupation anymore. So it's apartheid and occupation and colonization and so many other things. The second category that we focus on is the control of population. This is something that is related to what Anne have been presenting to you about G4S. So the control of population talks about all the civilian factors profiting from their participation in the Israeli efforts to control the Palestinian population, such as private security companies like G4S and companies involved of the construction of the wall and checkpoints, their maintenance and control, and companies that provide surveillance systems installed in the wall and checkpoints. Another actually case which I will present in my presentation is HP, who's also involved in this in the maintenance of the control of the Palestinian population, and they provide equipment for the checkpoints as well. And the third category that we focus on is economic exploitation. The Palestinian economy was actively developed by the Israelis. I mean, I don't know if a lot of you know about the Paris Protocol, but so the Paris Protocol actually was designed to offer a free trade between Palestine and Israel, and it says that Palestinians and Israelis can actually export and import goods and services to, from both sides of the borders. However, ever since it was designed, the Paris Protocol, there was no freedom of movement. So basically, what the Paris Protocol did is that it actually allowed the Israelis to use the Palestinian market and provide their goods and services, but the Palestinian market was deprived from doing the same, and it actually allows no competition between any Israeli and Palestinian product because the Israeli regulation do not allow it. And of course the restrictions of movement are also something that is challenging, because if we're talking about, let's say, dairy products like milk and others, I mean, if you don't have a freedom of movement and the products will get stuck on checkpoints and other stuff, I mean, they will get ruined on the way. And this is why the Palestinian market now depends on the Israeli goods and the Israeli services, because there's many restrictions preventing the Palestinian market from being developed. And that's why Paris Protocol only serves the Israeli market, and the Palestinian one becomes a captive market for the Israeli. Of course, we also have the exploitation of the Palestinian natural resources, which is the use of water and like many other resources, and the product of Ahava that's using the Dead Sea products for their own good. Okay, so if anyone, like all of what I've mentioned and what I'm going to mention actually is on our website, but you can also, I mean, if you're looking for a certain company that you want to know about, or if you're looking for the companies that are operating in Belgium and in Israel and in the occupied territories, the website can offer you this service by going and actually searching in the website for such companies, or sending us an email to actually require a clarification about certain companies, and we can help you with this research. Because I think that what divestment is actually offering the Palestinian struggle is a way for the internationals to also find a tactic to use to put a pressure on Israel as well. So it's not only us that can resist this occupation and try to end it, but it's also you that can help doing that by actually trying to identify companies that are from your own country and are operating in Israel. And we believe that not only that it's a moral responsibility, but I think that any state would benefit from ending the occupation, because all of the European states are putting a lot of money in this occupation. So they're also responsible kind of the maintaining of this occupation, but I think they're also wasting a lot of money on trying to make peace between the two people, but they're not actually doing anything effective to attain this peace. And I think the only way to attain it is by putting pressure, real pressure on Israel, such as economic pressure, because one of the main strength point of Israel is economy. It's economy which is backed up by Europe and by the United States, of course. So these are some of the reports we have published. Recently we have published 3 reports, one about agricultural products, which I think is worth looking at, and one is about bulldozers, which are used to not only demolish the houses in the West Bank, but they're also used to demolish the houses in East Jerusalem. And inside 48, it's not what's happening in the West Bank is not only happening in the West Bank, because a lot of houses are being demolished also all over Israel, but they're Palestinian houses, and a lot of people cannot even have a license to build houses. In a city like Lod, which is in the center of Israel, Palestinian people are not allowed to build houses for their own. So there's a huge report about bulldozers. Of course, all these bulldozers are not even Israeli bulldozers. There's one of the companies that is involved is Volvo, a Swedish company, Caterpillar, and many other companies. And by the way, they also make them pay for the bulldozers. So the Palestinians have their houses demolished, but they pay for their own house demolition. So that's another thing. I'm not going to talk about G4S because all of the information that I'm presenting here was mentioned already by Anne. So I will move to we have the case of Veolia. Veolia is also a multinational French company that was also engaged in the occupation. It was very well known. It got a bit famous actually when it started operating in the railway that was operating from Jerusalem to the settlement. So they said that they're offering their service, transportation service, but actually what they were doing is that they were offering the settlers a way to reach Jerusalem faster and to link Jerusalem to the settlements, which is also illegal, and it was built also in Palestinian confiscated lands, especially from Jerusalem. So Veolia is also in charge of many of the transportation operating in the West Bank. Again, these transportation lines, we have 7, 19, these are numbers of lines of buses that are operating in the settlements, and they are only operating for settlers. We had a campaign called Freedom Riders. I don't know if any of you heard of it, but what we tried to do is we tried to have Palestinians ride these buses inside the West Bank. So they wanted to actually show that they're Palestinians, so some of them wore kufiya, the Palestinian scarf. 3 buses did not even stop on the bus station because they saw that Palestinians are standing there. The 4th told them that he cannot take them. The 5th bus actually took them, but it was stopped then by the soldiers, and they were forced to go down from the bus. And they were also, some of them were also arrested for 24 hours in the Israeli detention centers. So that's the segregation that we're living under. By the way, Veolia also is also operating in environmental issues like waste management, and they're using lands from the Jordan Valley to actually throw the Israeli waste inside the West Bank. I don't know how many of you have heard, but like we have a really high percentage of cancer in certain cities of the West Bank. This is caused by the waste that is being thrown next to the Palestinian cities and villages. So not only that they're using our resources, but they're also throwing their garbage in our land in order to cause more damage to the Palestinian rather than the Israelis. We have the case of HP. The Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories is maintained and preserved by daily practice, surveillance and control. HP actually operates in the checkpoints. It's producing the biometric system inside the checkpoints, which means that they actually now provided magnet cards for the Palestinians. Any Palestinian who wants to go inside Israel or to work in Israel or in the settlements, he has to issue something called a magnet card. If you don't issue this magnet card, you cannot request a permit. So, and then you have to request a permit, and then you can pass by the checkpoint. That way, when you pass by the checkpoint, the soldiers don't have to have any contact with you. So you can just put your card behind, through the glass, and everything about you will appear in their system. So sometimes even if you get a permit, and you have and the mistake appears on their computers, actually you cannot enter, and they don't have any discussion with you. You're not allowed to discuss with them. They basically just yell at you from the speakers that they have, where everyone can hear your conversation. This is to prevent any contact with the Palestinian inside the checkpoints. So and there's a lot of campaigns against HP. I'm sorry, but what I forgot to mention about Veolia, that Veolia actually is selling now its shares in Israel. It has lost billions of dollars of contracts around the world. One of the main countries that actually also divested from Veolia was Kuwait, because we don't have many Arab countries active in the divestment, but Kuwait has been quite active also with G4S, so it's been successful with Veolia. I just want to mention the case of the Israeli banks at the end. This is my last case. But because I want to make a clear point about the economy of Israel and the economy of the settlements, all Israeli banks have funded and supervised construction projects in the settlements. They provide, any construction project has to have a bank accompanier. So all the major Israeli banks are involved. They're not only involved by providing services, they give loans and they provide financial services. They also give mortgage to anyone who wants to buy a house in the settlements, but they also have to supervise the project of the construction. So they're actually active partners in the construction of the settlements. In addition to that, they also, the Palestinian banks, because they also depend on the same currency, they have to buy clearing services from Israeli banks and do not have any direct access to the clearinghouse of the shekel. Of course, Israeli banks demand a high cash collateral of over billions of shekels. Additionally, the Israeli banks charge high commission for these services and pose limitations on the Palestinian banks, which increases the cost of the risks for them. Any transference of money between Palestinian banks as well, not just between Palestinian banks and Israeli banks, but between Palestinian branches inside the West Bank, they have to be transferred by using Israeli armored cars. They cannot use any Palestinian armored cars, even though it's between Palestinian branches. So the Israeli banks are also involved in the construction of settlements inside the West Bank. This is only to make it clear that there is no distinction between the settlements economy and the occupation economy and between the Israeli economy. All the major players in the settlements are Israeli or international companies operating in occupied territories and in Israel. And this is why we have to be very cautious about not only settlement products or companies operating in settlements, but about any Israeli or international company operating in Israel. Our database now go over 1,000 companies in the 3 categories of involvement in the occupation. It's all on the website, and sadly it keeps increasing. So we keep adding to the list. I suggest and I recommend to each one of you to actually go into our website and see the companies involved, and maybe read some of the reports to better understand the economy of Israel. Of course, divestment aims to put pressure from the outside on Israel and its economy. Using corporate accountability for the occupation is a powerful tool, both legally and politically. And this is why at Who Profits we continue to do that. We continue our economic activism. We provide professional research. Most of the research we do is based on the websites of these companies, so it's really reliable because it's actually in news and reports published by these companies themselves. Of course, G4S actually took away some of the reports that were put on its website after Who Profits report and after the growing of the divestment. But the original information that we got on G4S was from their own website. We also get information that we required from the Israeli authorities, and some of the information we get is based on some activists from different organizations that go around the settlements, and they actually take photos. Some of these activists are from Active Stills or Breaking the Silence or any other leftist organization. So if you decide to join the economic activism, we suggest that the targets for economic activism should be chosen with care, because it needs to make a difference for that purpose. This is why we don't choose all companies, and I know it might look a bit complicated for some of the city councils or universities to withdraw from all companies involved, but
of Gent University. And as was explained, the campaign about G4S has targeted also the university, where well, similar problems occurred as with the city of Gent. Now we are lucky to have an expert in ethics as our Vice Chancellor. So of course the question to you, Professor Mortier, is about the ethical responsibility of an institution such as this one, a university, in matters such as this.
Well, I will start by explaining a bit what happened at Gent University, but before doing so, I first would like to make a personal statement, something that doesn't commit Gent University at all, and that is that I'm personally convinced, and there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, that Israel is guilty of serious violations of human rights. And well, there's something in law that are called the peremptory norms. These are things against which one shouldn't sin at all. And I think, well, among them is aggressive war, including occupation of foreign territory, crimes against humanity, war crimes, apartheid, torture. There are only two, I think, that Israel arguably is not guilty of, and that's slavery and piracy. For the rest, okay. So this, I have been following the Palestinian case since I was 15 or 16 years old. That was in the 70s, and my indignation about what is going on is entire. And yet, as you will hear, I do understand what G4S is doing from an ethical point of view, but I will come back to that later in the course of the discussion. First of all, why did we decide not to exclude G4S from the public tender? And it had to do with well, security of our university buildings. There are over 100 of them. Well, these are exactly the same reasons as Philippe Watteau just mentioned. First of all, if you exclude a candidate in a tender on grounds that are illegal, or found illegal, then of course you pay, and you pay a lot. Now, you saw that Philippe Watteau said that they called Homans, Lisbeth Homans, and they asked her what to do. Well, we asked the Prime Minister what to do, of the federal government, and we got they told us, well, G4S Israel and G4S London are two different corporations, two different companies, and the G4S here in Belgium is not making any appeal to resources that are in the, let's say, in the orbit of other G4S branches. So we have to judge them that their participation in the tender on its own merit. And if you do so, then it's clear that you cannot exclude them from the tender. So we didn't exclude them from the tender. We decided not to do so because we got, well, contrary legal advice. Well, what happened next? Well, they weren't selected because there were other competitors that had better prices. So we are not working with G4S for clarity's sake. But that's just good luck. That's not because we made really a decision not to work with them. Now, when we decided about the case, we had here is our what do you call that? Our whistler. Professor Branch told us, well, what are you going to do about it? And we really thought about it. So, director, the vice chancellor, the deputy vice chancellor, our managers, our top managers, we talked about it, and well, that was the first thing we came up with, the legal problems that we have. The second one was something that we just heard from my one director. That's what I call the contamination problem. Of course, one can say we are going to exclude G4S. As you said, you could start with that. But the problem is, of course, that we have to behave impartially and that we cannot discriminate between different companies just because that's what we want to do. You should have objective, good grounds to do so. And well, I got the list, and that's the list from your website. And well, I have just been doing a lot of I have been taking a lot of efforts to invite the boss of Volvo Cars, Gent, to Gent University. That's a Chinese company, as you may know, Geely. And then, well, here is Volvo Group on the agenda. Then Hewlett Packard, Chevrolet, Caterpillar. I don't know. We invest in the current 10 years investment plan of Gent University. We invest 430 million euros, and I'm sure that Caterpillar is quite participating in our building efforts to quite some extent. The Bobcat company is on the list as well. Land Rover, Mitsubishi cars, and I thought about Coltan. This, so you know about the Coltan wars, I suppose. Well, let's throw this away. So there's the contamination problem, as you say, more than 1,000 companies. I wonder with whom we can keep working in the future. One after the other gets counted out. Now, I'm not saying that it's not possible to say, to determine what is real complicity in a matter, but I think that complicity, in this case, well, that this is going too far. It's a kind of contamination. Well, we aren't working with the G4S, but we have a science park. And there are all kinds of companies working over there. Suppose that one of them is indeed working with G4S. We don't know that, but it's on our land. We gave it to them to build their own buildings and to have their activities over there. Well, in that case, we would be guilty of being an accomplice to someone, the other company, who is an accomplice to another company, G4S, who is an accomplice to whatever the Israelis are doing in the Palestinian territories. And it's not difficult to construct even larger change. You see, I've been working for quite some time on what is called the Judeocide, or the Holocaust, and on the matter of who is a perpetrator, who is a bystander, who is an accomplice to. And there's a very famous article by Raoul Hilberg, in which he shows that if you look at who was responsible for the Holocaust, that you end up with a list of German institutions and of German companies, private companies, German public institutions, and so on. And there is simply no institution or corporation, whatever, that escapes guilt. Well, I think we cannot do very much with that. I prefer guilt attributions that are clear instead of confused, and that tend to, well, to be diluted over large networks. So let's look who is really guilty, who is really an accomplice, and then we will perhaps have some grounds for working. Then the third point, and now I'm referring to something that played absolutely no role in our decisions at Gent University to allow G4S to work or to participate in the tender. There's a third kind of considerations that as an ethicist I was, well, that I had some sensitivity for. It's very easy to say that someone is an accomplice to something, but in order to be an accomplice, one has to have, well, a bad intent, a bad intention. That's one of the prerequisites. Simply being an asset to something is not sufficient. You must have a bad intention, or the intention not to do something that is bad, and so on. Now, if you look into what the G4S, and I'm not paid by G4S in any way, but if you look into what they are doing, then, well, I find quite some examples of, well, careful conduct in the way that the corporation is operating. You saw that G4S Israel, that it became G4S Israel in 2002 when they took over Kashmir. And that was the Israeli company that was there. And you've seen on one of the slides that there was a growing presence of private security personnel. So this suggests that G4S is participating in the occupation by providing personnel. But that's not the case at all. No one who is operating at G4S checkpoints, at checkpoints where they use G4S equipment, no one there is personnel employed by G4S. No one. The same goes for the prisons. No one there is personnel for G4S. What they do is providing the equipment. And, well, that's one of the tricky things. Providing the equipment, in fact, may mean that you improve the situation in some cases for the people involved rather than worsening them. What do the G4S people say? Well, we have clear company rules on how to act. And for instance, let's put it in a pure dilemma. What would you prefer? Having a body scanner, the result of which is very clear, or being treated in a very personal way by a nervous Israeli soldier who picks you out on some arbitrary basis? What would you prefer? Or would you prefer Israeli soldiers and personnel in the prisons close to you, rather than being at a distance and having a panic button or something? So my point is that the kind of equipment that G4S is introducing over there may in fact, should take a look into that, it may in fact improve the situation of the prisoners, the people who are being checked, etc., rather than worsening them. Yeah? Just consider it for a moment. I have other situations in which this really was the case, but we can return on that to that point later on. You see, I'm not in any case saying that it wouldn't be better for G4S not to participate in that kind of things, but I'm saying that it is not clear that they are behaving in a guilty way. For that, one needs additional proof, and that's something that I want to come back to.
Thank you, Professor Mortier. I think I saw everyone writing things that you can react to later, and I'm sure some people in the audience will have questions for you as well. But first, we will hear from our next guest, Professor David. So there has been a lot of talk about law, and it was clear that, well, many of you who are not lawyers, you may think that law is simply a technical, neutral thing. But I think a case like this makes it clear that it's not like that. You ask an advice to two different lawyers and you get two different opinions, and that was the situation for Ghent University and the situation for the city of Ghent as well. We also heard you on complicity from an ethical point of view, but complicity is also, of course, a legal concept. So I'm very curious to hear what Professor David thinks about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think that the question is not very complicated, in fact, in law, because we have to start from the origin of the problems in which Israel is involved. And, well, if we take the Israeli settlements, things are very simple. The settlements are not only illegal, they are also war crimes. If you read Article 147 of the 4th Geneva Convention, I took a big pleasure to paint that on the wall itself when I made a tour with my bike 2 years ago in the Negev, and I was in the West Bank, and it was a great pleasure for me to write on the wall directly Israeli settlements are war crimes with reference to the 4th Geneva Convention. Because if you read exactly the 4th Geneva Convention, Article 147, it is stated that they say unlawful deportation or transfer. Unlawful deportation or transfer. Of course, it's a war crime. It's a grave, according to the terms of the Geneva Convention, it's a grave breach. In fact, it's the same. It's another wording for a war crime. But everybody thinks of the deportation between the Second World War. But in fact, when you read the comments which have been made by the ICRC about this article, it is quite clear that the transfer by a state, by an occupying state, of its population into the territory of the occupied state is also an unlawful transfer. And consequently, it is a war crime. And since societies like G4S and other societies which are perfectly shown by true profit, I take great profit from the work of this organization when I was working for the Brussels Tribunal in Palestine. It's quite clear that as far as G4S protects these settlements, they are accomplices. They have complicity in the war crime which is committed by the establishment of a settlement in the occupied territories. And consequently, there is a war crime of which G4S is an accomplice. Now the problem is to know whether a Belgian branch of G4S can also be considered to be an accomplice of the complicity acts which are done by the Israeli branch of G4S International. And that's something which is more difficult to prove, because in fact, if we take the case law of the Luxembourg Court, the European Court of the European Union, they recognized that a society, a firm, can have responsibility, can bear responsibility for the acts of its branches, of its daughter branches, as far as the mother society has a direct influence on the daughter society, if I may say. I'm not sure that it's the correct English expression, but I'm sure that everybody understands what I mean. And if there is this influence, this direct influence, which must be proven, of course, before a court, and I have not the possibility to make this kind of exercise with you, because I don't have any elements, I don't attend boarding meetings of the board of G4S, so I don't know exactly what are the relation between the mother society, G4S International, and the daughter, G4S Israel. So I'm not at all, I don't know if they are really quite different, if there is some influence or not, if G4S International has all the shares of G4S Israel, or if it has only, or if it has a majority of shares, this kind of things. I'm unable to answer this question. But if it's the case, if they have all the shares, or if they have the majority of the parts, it becomes a good case to show that G4S International would bear some kind of responsibility, of not only of classic responsibility, but of criminal responsibility, which is a step further, of course, in the responsibility, criminal responsibility in the complicity of G4S Israel into the protection, into the watching, the surveillance of the Israeli settlements. And we can have the same kind of reasoning if we take G4S, the wall of G4S, the surveillance of G4S of the checkpoints or of the wall itself. Even if the building of the wall is certainly a violation of public international law, as it has been shown by the advisory opinion of the ICJ in 2004. But, however, the building, the construction of the wall has not been shown as a war crime as such, or as a crime against humanity. It is certainly a violation of of public international law. More especially, I'm talking about the construction of the wall in the Palestinian occupied territories, not the construction of the wall just along the green line between Israel and the West Bank. But the parts of the wall which are inside the Palestinian occupied territories, there's this violation of international law, and it has been perfectly stated by the ICJ in 2004. Now, if we go now a step further, if we want to show that maybe G4S Belgium would be itself an accomplice of G4S Israel, it's true that from a legal point of view it's much more difficult, because the link between G4S Israel and G4S Belgium should go through G4S International and go on to G4S Belgium. And it's not an easy thing to show. It's easier, I think, to show that from a political point of view. But from a legal point of view, even in spite of the fact that I'm quite convinced by the Palestinian fight, in spite of this fact, I think it's much more difficult to prove that there is a kind of, well, let's go very far, of criminal responsibility of G4S Belgium into the acts which are committed by G4S Israel, because the link is much too large, it's much too long, it's very difficult to show that. Maybe it could be already easier if we leave the criminal responsibility to enter rather the civil responsibility, as we know it according to our civil code. Because we could say that there is a fault which is committed, and therefore we can say that the conclusion of a contract with G4S Belgium could be considered as a kind of contribution to the acts which are committed by G4S Israel. And now, you know, I'm not really dreaming, because if you look at some resolutions of the Security Council, it's very interesting to see, and I took one of them with me. It's the Security Council resolutions relating to the fight against Daesh, or if you prefer, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. And in some part, in some paragraphs of the resolution, here I quote Resolution 2170 of 15 August 2014. It is stated that, and I quote, all states shall ensure that no funds, financial assets, or economic resources are made available directly or indirectly. Directly or indirectly. And I insist, of course, on this word for the benefit of the Islamic State. And another provision condemns, I quote again, condemns any engagement in direct or indirect trade involving Islamic State and all other individuals, groups, undertakings, and entities associated with Al-Qaeda. You see, these words are good. These words, direct or indirect trade with undertakings associated with Al-Qaeda, it opens the door to wide interpretation, which could be considered in this case. Maybe it would be difficult to prove that there is what is so important in criminal law, to show the criminal intent to participate, to contribute to the complicity which is accomplished, which is made by G4S Israel. But however, maybe it's possible to show that there is at least a fault in the civil meaning of the word fault, according to our well-known Article 1382 of our civilian code. And that would be maybe something which could be tempted, which could be tried, and maybe sometimes you find judges which are open-minded and who could accept that. You have to choose the court, you have to choose the room in order to be sure to be heard in this kind of demonstration. But you know, it's like in tennis when you try to get a drop shot, you think, I'll never get it. And sometimes you get it because you run sufficiently fast in order to get the ball. As a tennis player, I know what about I'm talking. So maybe we can try to do things like that. But so I think that there are, you see, possibilities to attack, to make a case against G4S Belgium before the Belgian courts, either from a criminal point of view or from a civilian point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor David. To add maybe some information in the sense that the legal opinion, one of the legal opinions that were mentioned, the one that we wrote at our Human Rights Center, does indeed focus on arguments that allow to say that G4S Belgium is indeed part of the bigger G4S, based on the fact that, for instance, they have only one joint consolidated account, based also on their own communication about they are one global company, etc. And these are exactly the same arguments that were used by several cities in the United Kingdom, including big cities such as London or Edinburgh, to refuse Veolia. So the company from the buses that was explained earlier, so to reject them from the attenders. So these are arguments that have been tried in that context, and at least we believe that they can apply to G4S as well, but as said before, different lawyers, different opinions sometimes. I want to ask Najwan whether you want to react to some of the things that have been said. And I'm thinking in particular maybe of two things. The issue of this long list of 1,000 companies that you mentioned, and what Professor Mortier said about the contamination effect. It would be so much easier if there were a fair and objective way, because you can say strategically we choose one company, and as an activist I'm fine with that, but as a lawyer I'm saying, can you really do that? Choose just one. Would there be like a criterion that says like there's a smaller group of companies that one can focus on? And another issue, maybe the impact of G4S on the lives of people, as was mentioned.
So yeah, I would like to comment on some of the things mentioned, which relate kind of to your question. But I want to, obviously you all know it. So I want to clarify one thing. We want to end the occupation, not to normalize the occupation. By improving the system, improving the checkpoints, improving the prisons, we're actually making the occupation look better. And that way, the European would say, oh, that's a really nice place to live in, because the occupation is treating the people nicely, doesn't get really in touch with them. So, I'm not sure we want to go there. So, yeah, as a Palestinian, for me, it's very difficult to listen to someone saying, we will have a better system, so maybe at least now no one will touch you, but you can, they can, just see you from the glass. So we prefer, as Palestinians, to be honest, we prefer the worst situation ever rather than making the Israeli look better. So if they have to search, and sadly, this improvement of the system is how they market themselves. They actually use the Palestinian ground as a testing ground, as a laboratory to actually develop their equipment. They use it just like the weapon companies. They try the weapons in Gaza and the West Bank, then they sell it to other countries. And this is what not only Israeli companies are doing, but now, sadly, international companies. And if we are cooperating with these companies, then we are part of the crimes going on in this land. As for the links between G4S and Belgium and Palestine and Israel, I'm not a legal person, so I really don't understand how it goes. All I know is that G4S buys shares from security companies in each country that it actually works in. So if it's a Danish-British company that is buying most of the majority of the shares in an Israeli company, it's the same company that is buying from Belgium private company. So for me, I might be like simple-minded, but this is how I understand it, and this is how I see it, and I don't see how it's not linked in any way. As for the personnel, actually G4S does not have any more personnel in the checkpoints, but it does have personnel in the businesses inside the settlements. So it does provide security, personnel security for the businesses in the settlements, not in the checkpoints. But I'm not sure how that is different. Like if you provide personnel or if you provide equipment, they provide the ankle monitor for the Palestinian prisoners to actually, if they have house arrest, so they actually, G4S provides them the ankle monitor to watch the Palestinians and where they go. When we're talking about prisoners, we're talking about not Palestinian prisoners, but we're talking about political prisoners, administrative prisoners who are being held with no charges, and they are sometimes held for 3 or 4 months without charges, and that itself is illegal. Not to mention that the political prisoners are also many times, they are always charged in military courts and not in actually civil courts. And we're talking about a lot of children being actually held in these prisons rather than being treated as juveniles. So all of this, it's all a big mess of illegitimate acts inside Israel or the West Bank against Palestinians. So this is in regard to G4S. As for how, for why choose G4S or not another company. I mean, when we're talking about McDonald's or Max Brenner, for example, you can choose. They actually give some of their profits to the Israeli military, but then we can count on your morals to choose whether you can eat McDonald's or not. And I suggest you don't, because it's also not healthy. But then it's a moral responsibility, a personal moral responsibility that each of you can take. But when we're talking about big companies like G4S, who not the students decide to actually have a contract with, but cities and councils and states, then it's something that the state is involved in, and I don't think that the list of companies, I know that there's a huge list, but we usually don't ask everyone we don't choose the company, we leave each campaign to choose the company. So if in Belgium, the people of Belgium find G4S a good target, because it is a major player in Belgium, and it is a major player in the West Bank, then it is the right choice. But you also have to find criteria that makes it a successful campaign, that you know that you're gonna make achievements so it can encourage others to continue. But I want to mention in regard to the long list, I don't think that we will have to actually target everyone in the list, because if we get around 10 to 15 successes, I'm sure that 20 or 30 other will divest from the occupation because they don't want to lose contracts and they don't want to lose their reputation in other countries. So I think if we start with few companies, I'm sure that many others will divest before we even get to them. So this is my suggestion.
Thank you very much. Professor wants to react to that. Yeah.
But just very briefly, apparently nobody appears to know that G4S has already announced its intention to stop its presence in the territories. In June 2014 they said that they will end the running contract, 3 years, and afterwards it's done. So I want to say that the activism has been successful. That's one point. And the second point, I was a bit surprised. I thought that it was about that the problem with the occupation is the violation of human rights, besides other things, and that this is what should stop. Now you say no. We are not interested in making the position better of the people over there. We are interested in ending the occupation. So protest against the violations of human rights, in fact, is an instrument for something else. I think that's a very strange way to frame things. A bit later you will say, well, the problem is those children, etc., etc., etc. But you say we are not aiming at making things better. Would it be better than to ask the Palestinians to go on foot rather than be transported with Volvos or with other equipment? It's an intrinsically and internally contradictory way of saying that the problem is not the violations of human rights. That's the strange thing for me to hear. I thought this was the problem, and I was trying to say that if that's the problem, then G4S is not, in an obvious way, an accomplice to that. Because, well, there are some things, again, I'm not paid by them, but there are some reports in line with the UN guidelines. The G4S human rights policy requires the company not only to track and monitor risks, but also to respond effectively to risks by mitigating or preventing them. And there is good evidence to suggest that the company does act on what it knows about human rights risks in order to prevent and mitigate adverse impacts. So I think that company is, according to its own corporate human rights, if human rights are the problem, according to its own human rights policies, it is behaving correctly. G4S Israel has lobbied the Israeli government on positive changes to employment law around man security, to end excessively low bids in government tenders that are only made possible by inadequate staff benefits. That kind of thing. So they have a policy in order to prevent human rights violations, and you cannot say that they are simply assets or accomplices or instruments in furthering their practices in the prisons. The ones who are responsible for what is happening over there, that's the Israelis themselves. It's not, it's marginal. I'm not going to say it's not, it's marginally. It's G4S, because without the equipment, of course, you cannot run the prisons. But without food either. You need food for personnel in order to get them over there. There are a lot of aspects from the point of which companies or whoever may be responsible for continuing the situation that is there. Being a causal asset to something is different from being an accomplice to something.
Okay, I'm tempted to react, but I'll stick to my role as a moderator. You wanted to react.
I'm gonna react briefly. I don't see the difference between the occupation and the violation of human rights. Isn't the occupation a violation of human rights? I mean, how can you end the violations of human rights if you still have occupation? The occupation is violating the human rights. So I don't see the contradiction that you're mentioning, but we're saying that you cannot make the occupation look better by normalizing the occupation, making it a bit more normal for people. You know, you want people to get used to passing checkpoints and not feel angry about the checkpoint. So now I can pass the checkpoint without someone touching me. This is the logic that you're actually mentioning in your argument. As for G4S ending their work, they have mentioned that a few times already. They even told us, they actually sent us a letter saying that they are ending, they're ending work in the occupied territories in 2014, but actually after we sent a request for queries to the government, we got a response that they have an extended contract till 2015, till the end of 2015, so it's not now that they're ending their work, but also we don't know what's going to happen after the end of 2015, so they might also continue their work because they have already mentioned that they're going to end their work in there already a few times. So yeah, that's it. I think it's quite obvious. I don't really need to explain the contradiction between occupation and human rights. So yeah.
Yeah. Professor Mortier, I see an interesting ethical theme here, the idea of normalization of injustice, right, as an ethical problem. And I see it linked also to the fact that so many companies are involved. 1,000 companies are involved. So for one company to say, I'm doing something wrong, no, 999 others are doing the same thing. It cannot be wrong. It's the way children react when you tell them, no, so-and-so do the same thing. How do you react to say, it's not better because so-and-so do it as well. It makes it worse. So it's 99 times worse, 999 times worse because so many other companies are involved with it. But yet, somehow, in the mind of people, it works differently. And you think if so many are doing it, it cannot be that bad. And that seems to be a very difficult ethical but also psychological challenge, I think.
Yeah. But, well, I completely agree with that. That's not what's... Yes. If more companies, more actors are involved in a crime, then what happens is that the responsibility is diluted. It's the perception is that that somehow responsibility is divided over 1,000, whereas in fact one can argue that this is not the structure in which things work. It's not a division of responsibility. It's in fact, it adds to the severity of the thing. So I would agree with that completely. I have no problem with that. But well, it's just it's a kind of a paradox that I found that each time that people talk about improving human rights in order to protest against something, then the normalization problem shows up. I will take another example. There's again a Danish company. It's called Lundbeck, and it was accused of complicity in the killing of American prisoners who were on death row. So condemned prisoners, condemned prisoners in the United States, because Lundbeck, that company, was the only one who imported pentobarbital in the United States. Now they let's say a drug that's very known in Belgium, in the Netherlands, and in Luxembourg, because it's one of the ingredients of the euthanasia cocktail, let's say. But Lundbeck was the one who imported it in the United States. In fact, it is used to combat epileptic seizure. That's one of its main workings, apart from killing people between quotes. Well, what happened when the economic boycott ran up against Lundbeck, people asked them to stop importing pentobarbital in the United States, and instead leaving them to their own, do not participate in the killing of the people. Well, the first reaction of those states was, well, if we don't get the proper means for killing those people, and I assure you that with pentobarbital and with potassium chloride, they could do so very efficiently and painlessly. I know, and you know, that there have been some cases in which the drugs were administered wrongly, but if they would have been administered rightly, those people wouldn't have suffered. So the problem is that people who defended the boycott in this case were in fact responsible of states thinking again about reintroducing the electric chair, reintroducing the gas chambers, etc. In fact, much more inhumane ways of killing people. So my point is, using pentobarbital, not protesting against it. Well, this is the normalization of killing. Just as saying that, well, let's use the equipment, let's use the advantages of ICT in order to arrange relationships in our prisons, just as you have in that way also kind of normalization. So that's something that one runs up against each time that when one asks better treatment of people because of violations of human rights.
Okay, thank you. I see some hands going up in the audience, and I think it's probably time indeed to give the audience a chance to participate in the discussion. You can give your comments or your questions to any of the three panelists. Try to be a bit brief so that we can hear several people and not just one or two. So try to get to the point. You were raising your hand there. So.
Well, actually, I don't understand the comparison that you made. To my knowledge, the death penalty in the United States is not a violation of international law. The occupation of Palestine is a violation of international law.
Yes, but it's perceived right.
And it is a violation as occupation. It is also a violation of human rights. I'm a little bit amazed that, okay, I understand you're a professor of ethics, I'm not a professor of law, but I am not a legal expert, but I know that at least that there are two kinds of human rights. There are individual human rights and there are collective human rights. Collective human rights amount also to people's rights, right to self-determination, right to design their own, in a collective way, their own future. So it's very strange for me that you do not understand even that an illegal occupation is a violation of collective human rights.
I understand that very well. What I'm trying to say is that protesting against violations of human rights, individual ones and the minor kind, and that the protesting against that and succeeding in it improves the situation of the things that from the collective point of view you want to cure. You see? If it is so that G4S over there stops its being involved in the occupation, then the situation of the people who are suffering from it will worsen. It will not improve, it will not stay the same. See, it will worsen. But that's the point. So in that case, by worsening their individual situation, perhaps the institution that keeps alive let's say that bad situation, perhaps the institution will disappear, the occupation. But I'm not sure about that.
I saw another question there.
I have a comment on your example which you have made by referring to G4S as making the situation of Palestinians rather better than worse. I'll try to make a little comparison with an example that maybe makes it more clear what the point of view of Najwa try to make. It's what we see actually in Israel is like a robbery, a bank robbery that is made, and that the robbers are getting out of the bank, and instead of walking with the guns in the streets and making the lives of the persons on the street more dangerous, they actually call someone who helps them flee with a car. It makes not really the lives, or it makes not the lives of the persons on the street safer. It facilitates the robbery to succeed, and that's how I think the situation in Israel has to be seen. It's not really G4S that makes the situation of Palestinians better. It is the government that is facilitating its own occupation by using the aid of these companies. So I don't see your point of view of making the lives of Palestinians better when we see actually that it's more than 40 years, 60 years now that their lives are already in danger, and it keeps endangering. And you know, I understand very well the point of view of Najwa and the other points here. It's really a normalization here. So I don't think, from an ethical point of view, I think if you try to see it that way, that it makes the lives of Palestinians better, I will be careful with my words, although I don't know if it will come over as carefully chosen, but I think it's a perverse way to see it. That it's, let us see it from perspective of law. Companies don't actually care about human rights. We know already that companies has to make their own profits. The purpose of a company is making profit in order for the shareholders to enjoy these profits, not really helping human rights in occupied places as it is in Palestine. So I don't think from a legal point of view that it can be defended, nor from an ethical point of view if my example makes it a little bit clearer.
Well, in fact, but I understand very well what you mean, and I think I do agree, but I was trying to say that considering the whole question from the point of view of ethical or moral complicity is in fact a strange way of viewing it, because one can say just as well that they respect, as G4S is doing, from the point of view of having a human rights policy. Well, they have one. And in fact, the fact that they have one is, as you say, perhaps part of the problem, and it's not part of the solution. So what people want is boycott of Israel, in any way or another way, stopping of the occupation, etc. And I agree with that. That would be a good thing. But don't look for it in things like the complicity of a company like G4S in the violation of human rights, because they are trying to diminish the degree to which there is a violation of human rights. So this is not the problem. The problem is stopping the occupation, as you said.
So a question there, and then...
I would like to start with making a comment that I find it weird, some of the examples that you give, because for me, even if the example would be true, it doesn't make your argument true because you relate that to that example, because I don't think it always has to do with what is actually going on in Palestine. But what I actually wanted to say is that what I understand from you is that you're not sure that G4S is that much implicated in the occupation, and so that should be a strategic goal. Then I would like to congratulate you and be very happy that you are actually inclined to exclude all the companies that are actually proven to be involved in the occupation, and to exclude those from the contracts. But then you say that that list is too long, and so because the challenge is too big, you can't do that. So I would put the challenge to you and to put up the criteria for which Gent may exclude the companies, and pose those criteria to who profits and to the solidarity movement, and maybe we can come up with a list that fits the criteria. And if making those criteria is too difficult for maybe we can have a committee of professors or students debate what the criteria should be and which companies should be excluded. As for G4S and the fact that you don't believe that they're as much involved in the occupation, I'm happy to take up the challenge and prove it to you. I'm not going to take over the debate,
But we can definitely provide you with more documentation, and would you invite you to come and visit the prisons in Palestine as well to see what kind of work they're doing. So that's, would you take up those challenges?
Well, of course. Listen, I don't think that real complicity doesn't exist. I only say that G4S is a bad example of it, that's all. And why is G4S taken out? Because it's a powerful company, because it's a big one, because it's active in that many countries, etc. It's easily targetable. But apart from that, I think that companies that make military drones, for instance, that they are quite an accomplice to the conflicts in which they operate. And I can give lots of examples. The people who finance the building of the wall, it has cost about $3 billion. Well, look into, well, you talked about the Israeli banks and their contributions to, let's say, the building policy in the occupied territories, but the wall itself, it cannot be built without the huge complicity of a lot of banks, and the banks know why that money is used. So these are good targets.
I'm sorry to come back, but that was not my question. My question is, do you take up the challenge to put up criteria and to see if you agree that to exclude companies?
Of course, and if these are legally, yes. Yeah, but we have, for instance, we have a policy regarding, for instance, military research, where we say, well, if someone is doing military research, well, then we will exclude the contracts with the companies that lead to that. We will exclude them. We will not go into that kind of things. And we are thinking about quite other criteria that could help us to devise a good ethical policy at the level of the university. For instance, ethical banking is one of the purposes that we set ourselves. Don't invest the money you have in like in the building of the wall, for instance, that kind of thing. So sure, we are interested in doing so, and we would surely want some discussion and some reasonable deliberation on it, so that we can apply the criteria, and that to the outside world we can have a sound ground for excluding certain candidates for participation in tenders. We want to do so.
Okay, I would like to invite also some questions to the other speakers. It was yours, no?
Has G4S been successful in court in beating or dismissing tenders that have criteria to exclude companies like G4S who are active in the settlements? So is there precedents, is there examples, other examples of G4S actually doing what it makes people afraid of, what makes you fear excluding them?
I'm aware of one in which this was the case, and there was also the possibility of Bergen University and Oslo University of being treated in the same way, but they got away with it because the Danish society was brought over to London, and so they didn't file complaints, and they stopped the matter. But if it would have been otherwise, then they would have brought the ruling, well, the decision of Bergen University before the court.
I'm personally not so sure of that. I mean, everyone is afraid of them litigating, but actually litigation attracts attention, and they have reputation risks as well to run. It takes a long time before a court case that is started is actually decided by a judge, and in the meantime you have like 2 years of bad publicity against a company. So they will do a lot to actually avoid that too. I think the risk is a lot lower than it is generally assessed. The problem is that financially it can be so huge if you lose a case, I guess. But I'm not sticking to my role again. Yeah.
I have a question for the lady from Who Profits. I was just wondering, this debate is going on indirectly hurting the Israeli economy, yes? But why choose the indirect part? Because you have the problem of the link. For example, are we really hurting the Israeli economy? And why not directly choosing to, for example, not buy products that are produced in Israel, what is, in my limited point of view, is a much more sure way of blocking the Israeli economy?
That. Not me personally, but yeah. But now there's a new law that would actually, if you call for boycott, you can be be charged, and prosecuted in the Israeli courts, which is like the opposite of any democracy in the world. So yeah, but this is like a great example that anyone can do, and I think it's it ends up to the individual moral responsibility of whether I'm gonna buy Israeli products or not. I myself, because I've been living in the West Bank for so long, I try to avoid buying any Israeli product because I see it as part of contribution to the occupier and to the killing of the Palestinians, and this is why we also call other countries to boycott companies involved in the occupied territories, because we also see it as contribution to that military. And when we talk about G4S, and regardless of their human rights policy, we see it as a way to legitimize the existence of these prisons and checkpoints and whatever. I mean, the fact that you are willing to work with this occupation makes it legitimate. You are actually legitimizing the occupation, and this is why we try to call for the divestment from these companies. So it's not really indirect. It hurts the Israeli economy in a way, because the Israeli economy is benefiting from these companies, and it's also hurting the image of Israel as well. And the image of Israel is important in this case, because Israel is very good at lobbying itself around the world. And I think this is one important aspect. This is why we also call for academic boycott, which is cutting all ties with all Israeli universities, because all Israeli universities are involved in the military research. And we also have Israeli universities being built in the settlements, like Ariel College University, which is now getting bigger and bigger, and it's in one of the biggest settlements inside the West Bank. So there's many ways to put pressure, and we're calling for all measures to be done, but I'm here to talk about economic divestment. So. Yeah.
I would like to say something. I'm a lawyer, and once I attended a lecture given by Professor Chris van de Wijngaard, who is a professor international criminal law, and more important, she is also a judge in the International Criminal Court. And she gave this lecture on international criminal law, and she said something very surprising to me, or important. It was that Dexia Bank, which is a branch of a Belgian bank, is financing settlements. And she said the occupation is illegal according to international criminal law. If Dexia Bank is financing the settlements, then it's also making infringements according to international law. And she even mentioned the name of Jean-Luc Dehaene, who was prime minister of our country some years ago. She said he could be held responsible before the International Court of Criminal Law. I think this is very important now that Palestine is trying to join this court. Perhaps this might be another way of trying to attack the problem of the occupation.
Professor David, you want to react to that?
Yes, I'm a little bit surprised that Christine, who is a good friend of mine, said that the occupation is a crime under international criminal law. It's clearly a violation of international law because there is at least 100 resolutions of the Security Council asking Israel to withdraw from occupied territories or from de-occupied territories. I suppose you know the debate about the presence of or the absence of the article, but in this case, and it's quite clearly a violation of international law. can we say that occupation is a crime from a criminal point of view? That's more difficult in my view. But
I have to say, sorry, my words are perhaps not that correct.
Okay. Because so there is no problem about that. But anyway, it's true that Dexia can be considered to be an accomplice. And you know what is really important? If we forget just 1 second international criminal law, it remains anyway that the assistance which is given by Dexia to the occupation of the West Bank, being a violation of public international law, it is also a fault, as I said a little bit before. It's also a fault, it's a mistake which engages its responsibility from a civil law perspective. And that's quite possible to tackle this. Furthermore, it is also quite true that Dexia is not only doing that, it's not only the occupation, it's mainly the fact that Dexia Israel is in fact helping building of houses, for instance, in the settlements. And this is a complicity, a criminal complicity in the settlements, because settlements are a crime under international law. And for this reason, and I told that to Mr. Dehaan and Mr. Mariani, I remember at a meeting of the board of Dexia 2 years ago, and I said, you could be prosecuted before a Belgian court. In fact, there was no answer, and I just know that after this meeting, after this assembly, it was a general assembly of Dexia, and Dehaan was questioned by a journalist about what I said, and he said, yes, Professor David said this kind of thing, but of course he was making a caricature. But no, I think it's something which is quite real, and from a legal point of view, it would be quite possible to prosecute him for the basis, on this basis.
Thank you for clarifying this, Professor David. I think it is time to conclude our discussion. I want to thank the panelists, and in fact all the speakers, also Anne, who spoke earlier, and Mr. Watev, and of course you, the audience, for very active and interested participation. And I hope you take the message home with you. Have a nice evening.